Hey ladies and gentlemen, this instructional video will teach you how to calculate the x and y intercepts from an equation or from a table. I want you to look at this graphic real quick because this is a great reminder that an x-intercept can always be found on the x-axis and the y-intercept can always be found on the y-axis. That's going to be important information that we're going to need and utilize in order to calculate the x and y intercept from an equation and from a table. Go ahead, make sure you have your note guide, make sure you have a pencil and a calculator if you think you want to use one moving forward to take notes for the rest of this instructional video. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to do with this graph is I want to pick some points on the y-axis, random points. If there's a point on the y-axis, that means, if it's a line, that means it could be a y-intercept. So I'm going to jot down these ordered pairs of these random points I just picked. So 0, 6, 0, 2, 0, negative 1, 0, negative 3, 0, negative 5. Okay, did you see the pattern there? All of the x values are 0 if there's an ordered pair or a point on the y-axis. Okay, so on the y-axis, that's where I'm going to find my y-intercept. And in order to calculate that using an equation, I need to know and remember that the x-coordinate values of a y-intercept are 0. Okay, so that being said, this is really important. In your notes, you're going to want to jot down any point on the y-axis has an x-coordinate value of 0. That's going to be key when we're calculating the y-intercept from a table or from an equation. So press pause. Make sure you get that jotted down in your notes. Okay, so let's go back to my graph and let's look at any points on the x-axis. So on the x-axis is where I'm going to find the x-intercept. Alright, so I just picked some random points. I'm going to jot down their ordered pairs, and we're going to look for something that's similar. So the first one I picked was negative 5, 0, negative 3, 0, 1, 0, and 5, 0. Do you notice that any point on the x-axis has a y-coordinate value of 0? Okay, that's really important information. Alright, so go ahead and jot that in your notebook. That any point, sorry about that, on the x-axis has a y-coordinate value of 0. So any point on the x-axis, that's going to be our x-intercept, has a y-coordinate value of 0. Alright, make sure you get that in your notes. And we're going to go ahead and try an example here. Okay, so here's our first example. So take a second to jot this down in your notes. To calculate an x-intercept from an equation, your first step is to substitute y equals 0 into the equation. So think back to that graph. Any points that were on the x-axis had a y value of 0. You're going to solve for x. And then your third step is to write your answers in ordered pair. That ordered pair is going to be your x-intercept. Okay, press pause on the video until you have all 3 steps jotted in your notebook. Alright, here's our first example. So in this example, we're going to calculate the x-intercept. So what that tells me is that if I'm looking for an x-intercept, that point is on the x-axis. So if I want an x-intercept, that point is on the x-axis, that means y equals 0. Not x, y is 0. So think back to that graph. Okay, so I'm going to start by writing my equation. 5x plus y equals negative 10. And then I'm going to substitute 0 in for y. So 5x plus 0 equals negative 10. 5x plus 0 is 5x equals negative 10. Divide both sides by 5, and x equals negative 2. Okay, my third step said I need to write my answers in ordered pair. So x is -2, y is 0. Remember, x always comes first, y always comes second. So that is my x-intercept. I can also do a quick double check by thinking graphically. If I put -2, 0 on a graph, -2, 0 is going to be right about here. Turns out that's on the x-axis, which is a good thing because it's the x-intercept. So that's sometimes how I double check my algebra to make sure I've got the right ordered pair. Alright, let's take a second to write down these next 3 steps into your notebook. So to calculate the y-intercept from an equation, you're going to substitute x equals 0 into the equation. So again, think back to the graph and what all the x-intercepts or the points on the x-axis had in common. X was 0. Alright, you're going to solve for y, and then you're going to write your answer as an ordered pair. Alright, so here's our example. So example number 2. Calculate the x-intercept of this equation. Alright, so I'm looking for the x-intercept. Remember our notes we just wrote down? That means if I'm looking for the, I think I said x-intercept, but if I'm looking for the y-intercept, that means my y value is 0. So if I'm looking for the y-intercept, x is 0. Okay, so the y-intercept, x has to be 0. So I start by writing my equation, and I'm going to substitute 0 in for x. Just like that. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 4y equals 12. 0 plus 4y is 4y. And divide both sides by 4, and I'm going to get y equals 3. Alright, here are my values, guys. X is 0, y is 3. Remember, x comes first, so 0, 3. And if I use that strategy, that graphing strategy that I used on my last example, 0, 3, if I were to plot that, that means I'd go up 3 from the origin. 1, 2, 3. So it would be about here. That's good. That ordered pair is on the y-axis, so it means it's the y-intercept. Okay, look at this table, and from this table we have to identify the x and y intercepts. Now I want to point out a couple things. Everything we've just jotted down about notes has told me something about values of 0. So if I'm looking for an x-intercept, that means my y value is 0. If I'm looking for the y-intercept, that means my x value is 0. So any of these ordered pairs, like this first one, -5, 2, I know that that can't be an intercept on the x or y axis because there's no 0. Just to prove it to you graphically, if I were to graph it, I'd go to the right 5, and then I'd have to go up 2. Well, that point right here that I just estimated isn't on an x or y axis, so I can eliminate that. That's not going to be an x or y intercept. Same with 10, -1. There's no 0 there. If I were to graph it, 7, 8, 9, 10, I'd be somewhere over here, and then I have to go down 1. So again, it's close to an intercept, or close to an axis, but it's not on it, so it's not an intercept. Okay, so what that leaves me with is 0, 1. So if I were to plot 0, 1, that means I go up 1. Look at it, I'm right on the y-axis. So that point is going to be my y-intercept. Likewise, 5, 0 tells me I go to the right 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I stay there. So that's going to be my x-intercept because it's on the x-axis. So here's just a quick reminder that you've already jotted down in your notes. Any point on the x-axis, or excuse me, any point on the y-axis has an x-coordinate value of 0. So we said this was the y-intercept, and it's true because the x value is 0. We also jotted down earlier that any point on the x-axis has a y-coordinate value of 0. So again, here's my y value of 0. That means this is my x-intercept. Okay, so here's some tips. When you're looking at a table, zero in on the zeros, literally, and then you'll have to decide which one is the x-intercept and which is the y-intercept. So from there, you'll have to remember these notes that we jotted down in the video, or you could also graph them to help you determine the difference between the x and the y-intercept. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this instructional video. Complete your checkpoint questions, check in with your teacher to get your homework.